Richard and I have been having conversations about how KCJ makes its impact in Canadian education, and some of that is quantitative, like for CanCode, how many classrooms did we reach, how many teachers and students did we talk to, but some of it is qualitative. And I think you all know that one of my goals is for KCJ to contribute to what our industry knows about teaching. And so I invited him to join this conversation because that's what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to go through just slide by slide a conference talk that I gave last June at McGill at an education conference. This represents my high-level vision for the pedagogy of what we do. It started taking shape in 2014 when I was volunteering with KCJ and really enjoying that, and not so much enjoying my day job and contemplating maybe I wanted to actually pay more attention to this teaching thing and make it a career. So this has been a long time forming for me.
Are you sharing the screen?
I am not sharing the screen, but I should. Thank you, Bernat. And Lucie was laughing at me. Yeah, no, I can see it. Yeah. It's okay. Safe space. So I'm sharing my screen, and now you see my slides, yeah?
Yes.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing.
We were laughing with you.
So conference talk.
If she's sitting next to me, I'll tickle her if I have to.
So we're going to walk through pretty much as the presentation was, and I want to pause and talk along the way. I also would very much like you to add comments. I've inserted extra slides in between each section, and as part of my thesis, I really want your input because this is coming from my idea in my master's program, but it's all very relevant to what we've been doing. The cool thing that I've found is KCJ and all of our experience has led us to many of the same conclusions that I see in the research, pedagogical research. So these two things over the last couple of years since I've been here have really started to overlap very nicely. We're going to turn my idea for a thesis into a project inside KCJ, and that's going to involve our team and maybe a few other people as well. So I really very much want to know how you all make sense of this, parallels and connections that you see to the work that you've been doing here and the experience that you've had. Okay. So the title was Talk to Learn Math, Talk to Learn Coding. I delivered this at a conference called Mathematics and its Connections to the Arts and Sciences. As we're flipping through this, remember that the audience I was talking to was math educators and people who research math education. And the idea of this conference was for people who are doing things adjacent to mathematics education to share what they're learning from the math world and how they're using it elsewhere. You know about me and my field. I shared to the audience our mission inside KCJ, and my mission personally is equitable access to computational thinking and coding. And I started by showing a lesson that is very popular, a coding lesson from code.org. This is Let's Code with Anna and Elsa from the movie Frozen. And I paused my presentation and I actually went through a lesson. You tell me if you can still see this as it's loading. Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can.
Cool. So this is a 20-step tutorial that leads you to basically turtle geometry. This is, one of the things that we teach in Scratch. And because this is Hour of Code, it's massively popular. And it's expected that students will do this on their own, self-paced. And so there's a lot of tutorial built in. There's lots of comments. This is not intended to be facilitated by a teacher. And so this is not exactly what KCJ does, and I'm using this as a setup, as a here's what I don't want us to do. You can see the instructions very much say, here, do a 90-degree angle. You're going to need to use this block, and then I run it, and I see how she follows my instructions. Oh, and I didn't finish it. Oh, keep coding. Something's not quite right yet. Okay, well, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to do this, and if I get it right, oh, great, congratulations, you wrote 3 lines of code. You know, if you progress a little further, I'm going to go to lesson 5. You arrive at a puzzle that's like this. They've worked you up from steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 to understand what a repeat block is. And now they give you this puzzle. Let's create 3 squares, turning after each square. Be sure to turn by 120 degrees before each new square. Basically, you see a bunch of these are grayed out. I can't even drag and drop these. I can't do anything. All I can do is this and this. Okay, at this point, I'll jump back into my presentation. And I ask, what might we learn from this lesson? Perhaps not much. Why is that? Well, it sort of reminds me of these math word problems that you may remember from school. Let's say you've been taught multiplication, and the teacher gives you a problem like this. And it sounds like a real-world situation, but really, you've been taught, we're doing multiplication today, and you understand very quickly these are the points that you need to focus on. The teacher is leading you exactly to how to do this problem. And that's exactly what I find Anna and Elsa are doing in code.org. They're showing us 2 numbers, and they've only given us 2 places where we can make changes. So lessons like this, I call them follow me lessons. And very importantly, they fail to help students build any real understanding of the concepts. They don't have a fluency with the components that are available to them and the techniques that real programmers learn to use. And when you drop them into a new situation, they haven't been given any real strategies. They haven't had a chance to think creatively and understand how to solve a puzzle. They're being spoon-fed. And the problem with this is code.org serves lessons like this to millions and millions of kids. So if we say, we, Kids Code Jeunesse and many other organizations want to teach every kid to code, well, hopefully we're not going to do it this way. And so my next step for this audience is the field of computing education is young, and there's lots of opportunity for people to study pedagogy, to understand how to teach this well, because it's not well documented, it's not well understood. It's mostly left to people who have good instincts or have built up experience themselves and have arrived at a way to teach well. But it's not consistent. There's no industry-wide way of teaching that gets taught to teachers, the way there is for math or science or other subjects. However, there is, in the math world, a model that I think we could use. Okay. So I'll pause here. That's the setup. That's the type of K-8 computer teaching that I saw a lot of when I started in 2014, and that still exists. A lot of our code club projects are scripted like that. Our hour of code was largely like that. Do this, now do this, now do this. We've improved on that, and certainly in our lesson plans in the class, they don't look like that anymore, but it's still out there. My message to KCJ and to the research world is I think we should be more ambitious in how we teach, and there's an approach in the math world that I think we can borrow. So pause here for a moment. Any connections that you see, comments or questions?
very excited to listen to you. The follow-up, because I agree with all the points that you're putting on the table. I mean, in general, there is a follow-up tendency of, and maybe the reason because it's like this is because, and this is another question, no? Because people are learning alone, and they are not learning in an environment where there is a lot of people and can be a lot of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
These are courses that I prepared to follow different steps, and through this following, kind of starting to create some sort of connections, let's say, some structures, some mental structures, which is okay. It's a little bit almost like by copy and repetition that you are just, because there isn't a lot of food for thought when you have two cases, two places and two potential things to put inside these places, which is a 50% possibility of failure or of success, no, in this case.
And the success resides in the head of each student.
Yeah. Right? So your proposal that you're going to propose is open to be taught in both cases, in a context of a class and in a context of a lone student.
Yep.
A student
Yep. So we'll see that my idea probably doesn't work for everything that KCJ does. Mm-hmm. It's going to be for a specific context. And the project ahead of us is which parts of this can we borrow and will help us get better and more systematic about what we do, and which parts are just not going to work for us, and so we leave them aside. All of that is fair. Okay. So, borrowing the ambitious model. Now, a moment ago I said we should be more ambitious. There's a reason I said that. There's a model of pedagogy that's actually called the ambitious model. Okay? So it goes by a few different names in the research. And the research has been since about the late 1990s, so a little over 20 years. It started...
we have to be out of this room in 15 minutes.
Okay. It started in math, but it's been adapted to teaching science and English. Those are the ones that I'm aware of, maybe more. And it starts with a core set of principles. Each of these different names, different lines of research, they all rely on a certain set of core principles that I think we can use. The first is that students are treated as capable sense makers and reasoners rather than answer getters. We saw that in the example above. All students should be invited to participate in cognitively demanding activity. That is, we're going to make them all think. The proper job of the teacher is to elicit the students' thinking, figure out what it is they're thinking, and interpret that, and then orient them towards a proper understanding of things. But not to feed them the ideas directly, rather build up from whatever sense-making students are doing on their own, build up from that, and then give things formal structure, formal names, rather than the opposite. So if you take those as your base principles, then there's a number of teaching techniques that follow from that. What you do in a class is you give a task, a problem or a challenge. They call this a task in the research. Give a complex task that has been designed with multiple strategies inside it. As a teacher, when you give this problem, you give your students less scaffolding. You give less direct instruction of how to do it, what the ideas are, what the techniques are. You start with individual or group work on this problem, and then you end up with a whole class discussion. And that's in the title of this presentation, I called it Task and Talk, or Talk to Learn Math. The whole class discussion is given a lot of time when you teach this way. The task itself is fairly short, and that's the opposite of how we often do things. Students are allowed to voice their own ideas in whatever language they have, and the teacher responds to them strategically. And as you get into the practice of this pedagogy, there's something that they call talk moves. You build up a repertoire of phrases and moves, you could say, that you rely on as a teacher to keep discussions like this going. Okay, so I break this down into two areas, the task and the talk. And now let's come back to this problem. I said if you were to give this problem to someone who knows how to multiply, because you've been instructing them on how to multiply two-digit numbers, then they'll know exactly what to do. But if you give this problem to kids without showing them how to do it, what you see is lots and lots of different approaches based on what the students already know or how they make sense of the problem and what strategy they think they're going to try. So this is a very, very simple approach. This was a single kid who literally drew out 24 sets of beads to make necklaces. Each of them has 33 pen points inside it. And so this student was very literally counting up numbers. That was as sophisticated as they were able to do. And this is an actual problem that I saw in Ottawa last year at a conference. This is from a teacher in Ontario somewhere. This was a team of 2 students, and they had already figured out that you could multiply 33 times 2. They could get themselves that far, and they could figure out how much that was. And they understood they needed to repeat that and add those together. You'll notice that the final answer here is 792. 792. They reached the same endpoint, but with different strategies. And this team could go a little further. They could figure out how to do 33 times 4 and then add those. Same answer. This team figured out how to break apart 33 into 30 and 3. Do those multiplications separately and then add them together. Same final answer. And then there was a team who just knew the algorithm, right? So they were just able to do that. Now, if you teach this way, the research has shown it helps students build conceptual understanding. They have to grapple with the ideas. It gives them flexible problem-solving processes. So if you drop them in a new situation, they can try different things. It allows multiple avenues of access. So it's not being taught a single method. It reaches a more diverse set of learners, not just the kids who are ready to go and pick up the next thing. And it builds a student's self-perception as a participant in mathematics in a way that we talk about a lot in the math world and in the computing world. I'm not a math person, or, oh, I'm not a genius, I'm not a computer person. This solves that. It does a few things for the teachers too. Teachers are always wondering what their students are thinking. And because of the emphasis on talk and on students' work being put on paper, it illuminates what the students are thinking, and teachers really like that. And finally, teaching this way is something that you can learn and get better at. It's a practice you can build. It can be done as professional development. You don't need to be a naturally brilliant math teacher. And this is really important in the elementary school world, where most of the teachers arrive from humanities and are often intimidated by math. Okay. So I think we recognize some of these as goals that KCJ holds. And we're not alone here. We all say in this industry we want to teach every kid to code. We're trying to figure out how to do that so it's not just nerdy boys, to use a shorthand. So how do we open up computing as a field, as a set of tools, to more than just the nerdy boys? We have to somehow get into the classroom to reach everyone. There's logistics involved and access. And Richard, that's a lot of what KCJ does. But once you're there in the room, how do you teach in a way that makes this accessible to everyone so that they can appropriate these tools and use it for something that's important to them? So again, I'll open the floor for connections, comments, questions.
Meg, I think we all agree with you. There is no question. The challenge we have at KCJ is that we're 2 hours in the classroom in and out. So what's your solution for that?
Yeah, the
I
time,
think
the
in 2
time
hours you
constraint.
can totally, implement.
Yes, absolutely. But we are already doing it. Like, what's new?
For sure, I'm doing it.
Me too. So what do you bring to us that will help us in the context of these 2 hours in and out that we're not already doing is what I'm asking.
That's the next. Yeah, that's the next step. We won't get there today,
Yeah.
but that's next.
One
And
thing.
I think, Mike, yeah, as Lucie said,
What?
we pretty much agree on the way. We've discussed this in the past, and we want to make this a KCJ way. But now, yeah, the next step is just to make sure that everyone understands what it, what it means, what the KCJ way means.
Yep.
And I think we've explained it in length in the instructor manual.
I agree.
I love the idea that that we could systematize those talking techniques. I think that's something that we're really close to having. I think as folks have pointed out, we intuitively do this, and as you said, Mike, it's often left to instinct. But that really excited me because that's the point where I feel, yeah, we could write this down in a way that is not too difficult.
Yeah, I think it's about being aware. It's about being open to the fact that there's not one answer.
Yeah, good practices. If you could put together a guide of good practices that we could all share.
I think we already have one, though.
I think that
You do?
uh,
What are you referring to, Meggie?
No, one thing that I see is that the example that Mike puts, it's a mathematical example with no computers at all. And if you are teaching math with no computers, just with numbers, you are in one world. We are in another world. We're in a world where we already are using a platform with specific blocks, specific things,
Bernat,
and
Bernat,
sorry.
this reminds me of Code Montréal. The way we were teaching loops was exactly that.
No, yeah. Definitely. I mean, I'm not saying that we are not doing this. I'm saying that I'd like to see an example that is based on with an application.
Yep.
Because your application, you know what I mean. I mean, it's very detached from the environment that we are teaching. It's attached and detached at the same time.
It adds up another layer of complexity to the problem, right?
Well, my thesis is actually a question, and there isn't a set answer. The question is, which parts of this model will be useful for KCJ in the type of teaching that we do? And we don't have the answer to that yet. So some will fit and some won't. But I'm going to press us to think of using paper and using discussion and using code.
There is a design phase. What I see in your method is that there is a design phase with paper, almost with no answers, where you give some sort of freedom a little bit. Yeah. And this sort of freedom, when you are inside a constraint of an application, it's already constrained. Mm-hmm. You don't really have less freedom. You know what I mean? You have freedom too, but you have less. So it just, I think that it's important to...
So I'll connect this to two things in our lesson plans. From last year, our microbit intro, we had a challenge that we didn't often reach. It was at the end. Fill up the LED screen any way you can think of. Right? And my hope, I had this in mind, my hope was that we would see interesting strategies. I don't know that happened often. In this year's ArtBit lesson plan, we say the end point is you're going to show us a story. Get there some way. Right? So I'm trying to point us in that direction. Matt, this slide here is what you've been talking about, the talk moves. So what I really love about this theory, I think is going to help us, is it gives us a classification. It gives us terms that we can all use as the ed dev team when we build our training materials, when we build our lesson plans, and when we coach the whole instructor team. So if nothing else, this will help us codify and give real names to the things that we're already doing. In some places, it'll help us sharpen just a little bit. So this is my conjecture that ambitious pedagogy might be well suited for teaching computational thinking and coding, because if you boil it down, it helps students understand the concepts and build fluency with skills, and it's good for scaffolding new teachers. If you give them a method to follow as a teacher, they don't need to be an experienced developer, and that's good for us, for our hiring and instructor development, and it's good for the teachers that we work with. And so just to come back to this before we close, I wondered, if I were to do a problem like this, it wouldn't be the way they did it in code.org. It would be something like, I'm going to show you the shape, the end product, and pose the question, how would you create this kind of shape? And my job is then to listen and strategically highlight the important ideas that kids are developing around the room, and then give them formal names. So we'll stop here because I know, Lucie, Yasmin, you're going to sign off. I'm free to go another half hour if people want to continue the discussion. And I'll continue recording. So Lucie, Yasmin, you can watch later.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting. Thank you, Mike. Looking forward to the rest. Bye.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to skedaddle as well. Richard, I may be a few minutes late for the meeting in 30 minutes because I have to get up now.
Okay. Okay.
Matthew, do we still have our meeting or no?
I canceled it.
Oh, okay.
You're free.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt.
So, Mike, I had moved our meeting because I thought we had a meeting, Matt and I.
Okay.
So, if you want to talk with Richard, it's fine. We can still do it in 30 minutes. But if you aren't free, I am available.
Sure. So why don't we wrap up now and then, well, I mean, group, do we want to talk a little bit more?
I think it's things are well understood.
Okay.
I agree. That is important to try to put as much as we can on this.
For our meeting, so I guess we're just gonna meet in 30 minutes.
You and me, Meggie?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where I'm headed.
Can you share these slides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the education drive. There's a folder called academic papers, and it's in there. And I'll share it again.
Excellent.
So maybe one question. I think you approached this question before,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure. So what do you think about, how do you think teachers will be ready to take that approach?
I don't know. Teachers, you mean in the schools?
Yeah, because one of our goals, I don't know if it's one of your goals in this area of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but is teacher being able to deliver themselves.
Yeah.
Content. So do you think they at some point will be interested in delivering content
This way? I think some teachers that we meet are already going to know about this, probably if they're getting math development. There's a summer conference in Saint-Sauveur every year where they do this long-term, year after year. Teachers come back and they develop their math teaching. So that must exist somewhere else in the country too.
Could you
But it's rare, I think, still.
Could you come back to the slide with the...
And JD, we'll have to use our judgment. I really don't know yet.
Yeah, the slide with the specific wording to
The
bring
talk
down.
moves.
Yeah, the talk moves. I like to take note of these moves. And maybe if you want to talk maybe expand on this,
Sure.
on this slide?
So there's two reference slides here. I showed you a number of researchers at the top who call this different names, but they're all sort of circling around the same idea. So this comes from one of those researchers, Mary K. Stein. I should put the citation here. I have a book at home, and I'll bring it in so you can all take a look. She's boiled it down to 5 practices for running that discussion. First, as a teacher, you know the problem you're about to give them, and you can anticipate what the different strategies might be that you're going to see. Maybe you can even anticipate, if you know your kids, who's going to do what approach. Second is, once you give out the problem, you're monitoring around the room. So this is, some classes are already teaching this way all the time, where kids do things in small groups or in pairs. And the teacher is very used to walking around the room and looking at their paper and seeing what they're doing. So you monitor. Then in your head, you select which of these are good examples and have something interesting that you want to share. And then you put those in a sequence, probably the simplest one first that everyone can understand. And then you move up to more sophisticated or more interesting ones. And then consolidate is the discussion itself, where you do your talk moves and you have the students describe to the class what they were doing, what they were thinking. And consolidate means you're trying to get everyone to understand each of these strategies. And then you do these moves. I have some videos picked out that we'll watch together, and you can see how this works.
You shared last year, I don't know if you shared it with everybody, but I remember I saw a video about, or you talk about the video. There is a video that you always talked about, the one with the water tank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a video that we could watch all together? Because I think that would be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain exactly what this video.
I won't get into it now, but there are several videos of researchers and teachers like describing their method, and then some where you actually see a problem. And I'll show some examples so we can have more of an understanding. This is going to happen over the next 2-3 months. Okay. Any other thoughts? And then we can stop for now. Richard, did you have something?
Yeah.
Good job.
Oh, thank you.
To be able to, if there's paperwork, to see the progress within that, with a 2-hour time span, for instance, to be able to document that and like have the kids, or no one throws away any paper, but let us see where you went, like your starting point to your end point at the end of this, at the end of the workshop, and the impact of that.
Kind of like the question at the beginning, you draw whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe it's nothing. But
Or
at the
to
end
even
of the class, now if you repeat the question, what you would draw now?
But and you guys know, it's like kids learn. Everyone learns differently, right? So if you have a microbit in front of them, but you also have a pad of paper that they can just sketch on. Maybe they're sketching out something first before they work on the microbit.
Sure. Well, what I see with this method is that this design phase where you throw ideas is important. Obviously, I was talking about the application. You can also do this with the application. You have a bunch of blocks and you just try things, no? You just try things. And that's the same way of drawing things, not because you have this set of tools.
Yeah.
It's just that maybe it's because we are old school in a certain way, but I still think that the paper and the pencil has a potential that it has more freedom than the other, because the other is already a room, and with the paper and the pencil, the room is more your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. So I think that this would be something to discuss. You know, which kind of freedom, or how we would which would be the right approach for this design starting phase. But I agree with the questioning. I mean, the questioning is obviously something that when I felt that because so it depends on the students. Some classes are tough, but sometimes you find students that our classes that you see that when you put a question, there is an interesting answer, or there is a good environment. Okay, because there are environments. Okay, so environments can be hostile, but sometimes you find a good environment. How much time do you invest on that? Because obviously you have also something to deliver, and it's easy to get lost when you start. Because the thing is that between 8 and 12 years old, it's very different the feedback that you're going to receive from students. Sometimes the answer can be, my dad is working in, and well, that's nothing to do with what I'm asking, but they just want to talk. They just want to be there and be at the light of the class, So maybe when they're 11, 12, they're starting to have more like the tools to have a better conversation. So also the teacher has to be experienced enough to be able to stop and say, okay, you're answering what I'm asking. Let's move on. It's there are so many variables. I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Even if your intention, even if you have a plan, even if you have this set of tools of this potential, things can move. But it's good to have them anyway, because if you have them, you have more possibilities to bring them to this to this area than if you don't have them.
That's right.
That's for sure.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We'll stop for now, and Meggie, I'll see you at 11:30.
He's there.
All right.
Okay. See you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye bye.